Hello again and welcome to Corpa Talk. I'm your host, Kevin Bousquet. We're changing the focus of the show a little bit. We're going to be calling it Undercover. And if you missed our show last time, I had brought in a lady who was involved in selling electronic security products that can possibly compromise communications in the workplace. So we're going to pick up where we left off last time with respect to corporate information leaks, situations where you own a company and somehow, some way, confidential information is leaking out into a company. So last focus we had on the show was to identify and introduce you to some of the equipment that's out there that could possibly compromise your communications. Today I brought in a very, very special guest, Mr. Doug Ralph. Doug Ralph is a counter-electronic surveillance expert. He is involved in doing counter-electronic surveillance, going into these companies and looking for listening devices, trying to determine electronically where the information leak is. Is it coming out through the phones? Is it coming out through something in the boardroom? Is it a problem with the employees? A full, complete analysis, if you will, of where the leak is coming from. Now, I have known Doug Ralph for many, many years. I got into this business very, very young. I've known him from day one. I have done hundreds of counter-electronic surveillance sweeps with him, and in my view, the gentleman sitting beside me is probably the foremost authority on counter-electronic surveillance in North America, arguably, in my opinion, probably in the world within the top 10. He is a retired peace officer with the RCMP Special I Unit. When he retired, he formed his own business, and he's been in business solid 10 years doing counter-electronic surveillance for corporations, companies, public companies, doing full prospectuses on companies. He's probably one of the most sought after people in the business. It was a very hard thing getting him here. Doug, welcome to the program.
Thanks very much, Kevin. I appreciate it.
Okay, now maybe if you could just give us an idea as to your background and how you started out doing what you're doing.
Well, it goes back quite a few years. The last 14 years that I was in the RCMP, I was specialized actually in the other aspect where I was going into target areas and putting devices in them, doing telephone taps.
So you were planting this kind of stuff, correct?
That's correct, okay. Yes. Yeah, that was my mandate in life, as well as going to court and giving evidence. I also did some of the other. I did some countermeasures, but I was primarily offensive electronics as compared to defensive electronics. And what I do now is strictly defensive electronics. Okay.
And so who's hiring you? Well, can you give us an idea, as you're, without mentioning names, of course, can you give us an idea of kind of the profile of your clients that are hiring you to do this kind of work?
Primarily major corporations, as well as crown corporations, and there are some private individuals that request the service as well for residential work.
Okay. So let's just say, for example, let's pretend I have a company, you know, it's public, you know, we have a boardroom meeting, and, you know, every single time we mention something confidential, okay, the information finds its way out into the public somehow, either via someone who's posted something on the internet, into the press, or stuff like that. And I say to you, look, Doug, you know, I don't know how it's getting out, but people are finding out about what we're doing. This is confidential information. Only someone on the inside could have known about this and took it out of our business. So if we brought you in, can you maybe just walk the viewers through kind of like where you'd start as far as it?
Well, typically in a boardroom scenario, you have to look at the total scope of things. Okay. The people who actually are attending, their credibility, the control over those people and what they're allowed to take in, whether they take in cell phones, whether they take in personal devices, and those devices are possibly being abused. You have to look at the accessibility of the boardroom itself. Is it locked after hours? Is there control over the boardroom? Can people put devices in, take devices out? And you have to look at the technology that is used in the boardroom during the course of the meetings.
Okay, so it's not, it sounds like you're saying it's not always electronic. There could be other reasons besides.
Definitely.
Okay.
Yep.
So let's go to the electronic level, because I think I want to try and pick up where we left off when we had Ursula here. Can you kind of walk us through how our phones could be tapped, or how a boardroom could be, like, what is it that you're doing when you go into these places exactly on the electronic end?
Well, on the electronic end, you basically take in a fair bit of equipment that will answer an awful lot of questions. To make it short and simple, a person does a full spectrum analysis of the area. Spectrum analyzers identify the presence of signals.
Okay, so this would be kind of like wireless devices, like what our viewers would probably think as far as wireless bugs, that kind of stuff, because we saw some wireless cameras here last show.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah, wireless devices, either wireless devices that have been placed in there for the deliberate intention of compromising the meetings. Conversely, wireless devices that the client may be using and shooting himself in the foot with.
Okay, can you explain that?
So sometimes clients have wireless microphones for doing presentations.
Oh, I see.
And it's not uncommon for these wireless microphones to broadcast up to 2 blocks away, city blocks away, that people on the outside need only tune into.
So if I had like a scanner, I could easily pick up some of this stuff if I knew the frequency, or if I could pick up the frequency?
That's correct.
All right.
Now, getting back to spectrum analysis, we're talking about signals through the air. There's also devices out there that send signals through the power lines. So you have to do a spectrum analysis of the power line as well.
Okay, so this is the baby monitor kind of an application where I'm plugging in a transmitter here and a receiver there, but I think it's somewhat more sophisticated, is it? Or
it can be as simple as a wireless babysitter. It can be something more sophisticated, some type of actual bugging equipment that people have gone out and deliberately purchased and they're abusing to monitor what's going on.
And what about the phones? Like, I mean, in my career, I've taken in a lot of calls where these clients call me up and they think right off the bat it's the phones. They say, someone's listening on my phones. This was a phone conversation that I had. So can you walk us through the phone aspect of this so people can understand just exactly how it is a leak could be brought out through the phones, if it is the phones?
Well, telephone technology is wonderful, but when it comes to telephones, you have to look at them as possible intercept devices.
Okay.
Government regulations state that prior to sensitive or classified meetings, any telephones in the room literally have to be unplugged and removed.
Wow. Okay.
Taking that threat away. The reason being, a lot of the telephones have hands-free features. If a person has the knowledge and the equipment, they can actually target a telephone in a boardroom or an office through the company switch known as a PBX.
So like in the phone room, or?
The PBX is a switch in the company.
I see.
So if a person has the right equipment and knowledge, they can access the PBX either through an electronic mailbox or a diagnostics port, target a telephone, activate the hands-free feature, and listen to what's going on electronically.
Because that sounds really scary to me. So you're saying that if I have a phone and the phone is on, like on the hook, and I'm using a speaker phone, like it has a speaker phone in it, that speaker phone can be targeted and actually turned on?
That's correct.
Okay, that just is scary. Okay.
Yeah. Well, it's a fact of life, and this is why the government regulations are such that no phones are allowed in a room during the course of a sensitive or classified meeting.
Wow.
There are other telephones that are conference call phones, and technically they can be compromised. There's one in particular that has a power supply that has a little port on the side of the power supply, and you can literally plug a tape recorder into that port, you can plug a transmitter into that port, and everything that is said over the conference call is then compromised.
Wow. Okay, and what about tracking devices? Like, there's this whole new thing I'm seeing on the internet where these tracking devices, where people are buying $300 devices. You put them on the bottom of a vehicle and tracking. I mean, do you have any comment about that? Because I don't know a lot about these devices. I've been kind of looking at them just to familiar myself with them.
It's a fact of life with tracking devices. Tracking vehicles has been around pre-electronics. Okay. If you go back far enough, people would strap a container with ultraviolet solution that would drip on the tires, and the person following that vehicle would have a an ultraviolet light on their vehicle, and they would simply follow the drips on the road.
Wow.
So tracking vehicles has been around a long time.
Okay. Now, let's create the scenario. So say, for example, I have you come in, you do this boardroom sweep for me before one of my meetings, and we find some kind of a wireless device in there. You've located it through this wireless spectrum analyzation kind of thing. So I own the company. I say, what do I do now? Like, do we notify the police here, or like, what happens in these scenarios statistically when you have this situation happen?
It depends basically what the client wants. If it's one of the client's own devices that he's shooting himself in the foot with, you just turn the device off or remove it from the room. If it's something that's been specifically planted in the room, you can involve the police, because it is technically a crime scene.
It is a criminal offense, because we were talking about that last in the show, that people need to know that recording conversations of two people, and you're not a party to that, that it's illegal. So it's really important. So we could call the police here, and they would take a report and try and do an investigation, you think? Or?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's a 5-year indictable offense. 5
years, okay, because we didn't discuss that last time. So 5 years to plant any kind of a listening device on someone. Okay, so any other examples of what you'd be suggesting I do if I find a device in my boardroom?
Well, it depends on the scenario at hand. One particular scenario that I particularly like is to have a concealed camera system put in, looking at the device.
Okay.
And then once that's in place, you put a fault on the device so it stops working.
Cool. Okay.
And then the person obviously can't get their information, so they come back to the target area and they fix the device, and you've then captured who's
So you're saying
who's
if you find
it.
the device, set up a camera, a hidden camera, to see who's coming to fix the device if we can deactivate it.
That's
okay.
right.
Any other anything else that you've come to?
Yeah, you could feed the device false information, and then when the false information comes back to you, just go back through the loop and know who's involved.
Okay.
Or you could take the device out and simply destroy it.
Okay.
And stop the flow of information.
Okay. Now, can you talk about the equipment that you're using in kind of layman's terms? Like, what is this equipment doing? So we know that you're doing something to listen to radio waves. What about, like, what are we doing with respect to the phones? What is it you're doing as far as?
Well, with the telephones, it depends on the technology that's involved in the boardroom. There's many different types of technology, and we go in with